Okay, class, uh, we're going to get started here. And thank you for coming and doing your assigned work. Today, we're going to talk about the digestive system and how it prepares food for us to use by all of our body's cells. Now, what is digestion? Well, it is the chemical breakdown of complex biological molecules into their component parts. There's three things that we eat that we get energy from. Three components, three types of biological molecules, rather. The first one that we're going to talk about is lipids, and those are your fats. We break those down. Our body breaks them down to form fatty acids, which our body uses. And proteins are broken down to their individual amino acids, and those are your meats, your fishes, um, and then, of course, we have those wonderful carbohydrates that our body breaks down into simple sugars, and those are your breads, tortillas, your rices, your pastas, anything of that nature. So, what is the function of the digestion? What is the function of digestion? Well, it produces various chemicals to break down the food that we eat, and it also filters out harmful substances and gets rid of the solid waste that we take in that we don't need, and it does that through the excretory system, and we'll talk about that later on in this course. For now, we're just going to stick to those top two, and we'll talk about excretory system later on. So there are mechanical and chemical components to digestion. We'll talk about mechanical first. And what does that do? Why do we call it mechanical? Because it's mechanical. It's the physical action of changing larger pieces of food into smaller pieces of food. And we do that a few ways. Do that by chewing, tearing, grinding, mashing, and mixing the food in our mouth and throughout our digestive system, digestive tract. There's also chemical components that allows us to break down the food. And what does that do? It changes the chemical composition of food with the aid of proteins called digestive enzymes. And we use digestive enzymes to break down carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Digestive enzymes are special proteins that help break up large molecules of food into very fine, tiny molecules that may be absorbed and used by the cells in the form of nutrition. They have to be very small to be able to travel around and get to the parts of the body where we need them. There's phases of digestion that we'll talk about. First, of course, there's the ingestion. That's the actual act of taking that and taking the food stuff and putting it into your mouth. Then that food moves through the peristalsis movement of the digestive system. Then we start to actually digest it. Then absorption takes place. We further digest it a little bit more, and then we finally excrete it. Here's a good shot of our digestive system, what it looks like. There's different colors here. This would be a good spot for you to pause and take note of those areas of the digestive system, namely knowing all those main colored areas in there and knowing where they are. Um, so, in the digestive tract, it's basically a long tube with many sections and areas in it. And again, those areas are highlighted by the different colors. I want you to look at the orange, the greens, and the blues. And the yellow and the red, those are accessory organs there, and that small blue piece in there as well. Those are accessory. And again, this tract begins with the mouth and ends in the anus. Now we're going to talk about the specific parts of that digestive tract. Of course, we've got the mouth. From the mouth, it goes to the pharynx. From the pharynx, it goes down the esophagus to the stomach. From the stomach, it goes into the small intestine. And then from the small intestine, it goes to the large intestine. And it's kind of a misnomer there. Even though it says small intestine, it's actually a lot longer than large intestine. Um, there's a lot more to the small intestine than as far as length. And here's those other colored parts of that picture. We're going to discuss those. Those are organs that are not in the digestive tract, but help in the in digestion. Those are your accessory parts that are very vital uh, to digestion and how your body does that. First of all, you're going to have your teeth, your tongue, salivary glands. These are all in your mouth. And then we're going to talk about the liver and the gallbladder. Also, your pancreas. Liver and your gallbladder function in producing bile. Your pancreas is that organ that secretes insulin, which allows us to regulate our blood sugar. That's the part of the body that is not working correctly in type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetics patients. And that's something that you can research further on, especially if that's something that runs in your family. So what is the function of the mouth? Well, if you stop and think about it, what does your mouth do? Well, first of all, that's the entrance point to all of the food and drink that you take in. It's also known as the oral cavity. Oral cavity and mouth are synonymous. It's also where we do all the tasting of our food. Of course, if we don't like what it tastes like, we usually don't eat it. Mechanical breakdown of food happens in the mouth. And we also have secretion of salivary glands, secretion of saliva through the salivary glands. And it also contains the enzyme salivary amylase, which breaks down carbohydrates. So structures in the mouth that aid in digestion, and what they do is your teeth, of course, they cut, they tear, crush, and they grind the food in your mouth. Salivary glands, they produce and secrete saliva into the oral cavity. And there is actually three main salivary glands in the mouth. First of all, the parotid gland is beneath the cheeks. Submaxillary would be found below the jawbone, and sublingual is below the tongue. And we'll have a picture here shortly for you to take a look at that and where those are exactly. So what does saliva do? It moistens the food and contains enzymes in it. Those special proteins our body uses, like ptyalin and salivary amylase. That begins digestion of starch into smaller polysaccharides. What does your tongue do? Well, proportionally, your tongue is the strongest muscle to its size. Proportional to its size, it is the strongest muscle in your body. Just think about it. You can move it so many ways. You can do so much things with your tongue, and its form is meets its function. What does it do? Well, as far as food, it mixes and rolls food into tiny mashed up bits called boluses. And we call any food that we've chewed for a while, getting ready for it to be swallowed, as a bolus of food. So what does the tongue do? It pushes that bolus toward the pharynx, which is the back part of your throat, into the esophagus when swallowing. Here's that picture I promised you. And this is a good spot for you to pause and highlight those areas that do not look familiar to you, so you can study those and be familiar with them, and you'll be able to have success in this unit if you do that. So I invite you to do that. This is pretty much point and write down what it is that you don't know. So I'll leave that up to you. But these are some good spots of where the ducts are, the salivary glands, and all those wonderful things that we have in our mouth that help in digestion. Real quick, we're going to talk about deciduous and permanent teeth. Those deciduous teeth are those teeth that you get when you're a baby, starting around 6 to 8 months, all the way up to 2 years old. When we start to lose those teeth when we're about 7 to 8 years old, and then we start to get our permanent teeth in, and we can get teeth in all the way, usually to around 25 years old, where we get those third molars in, which are called your wisdom teeth. So there's a mechanism to your swallowing. Go ahead and swallow right now as you're watching this, and listen and feel what your body does. Okay, it's a coordinated activity of the tongue, your soft palate, pharynx, and esophagus. And there, when it's broken down into 3 phases. Um, First phase, food is pushed into the pharynx by the tongue. That's something that we can voluntarily do. We can control that. Once the tongue blocks the mouth, the soft palate closes off the nose, or the nasal passage that runs from your mouth to your nose. Then your larynx, your Adam's apple, rises so that epiglottis, which is a flap of tissue, can close the opening of the trachea. And I know some of you have done this already. As you're eating, the trachea is your windpipe. So if you're eating and you happen to get food down there, as you take a breath, you'll start to cough. It's an automatic reflex that your body has, and you'll have to get that food out in order for you to breathe correctly. Here's those 3 phases. What I want you to note here is that the first phase, which is the buccal phase, that's the only one that's voluntary. Starts by a voluntary action. Everything after that, the pharyngeal and the esophageal phase, those are all involuntary. Your body does that automatically. Pushes that bolus of food down, and it starts to massage it, open and close, until, with the help of gravity, until that food hits your stomach, and then it starts to get broken down chemically. Then your esophagus. What is it? Well, it is a straight muscular tube that is about 10 inches, or you could say 25 centimeters long, which connects the mouth with the stomach. It takes about 4 to 8 seconds for food to pass through to the stomach. Its walls are made of smooth muscles that contract in a wave-like motion. And that wave-like motion is called peristalsis. Peristalsis is what propels food and liquid slowly down the esophagus into the stomach. Before it passes into the stomach, it's got one small area that it needs to pass through, and that's called this cardiac sphincter. That's a ring-like valve that's pretty much the end of the esophagus, and it has to relax in order to allow food into the stomach. Okay, class, thank you for listening to part 1 of digestion. We're going to go ahead and stop here, and go ahead and go back. Feel free to rewind and add to your notes if there's anything that you may have missed or you didn't understand very well. Feel free to do that at this time. I will complete part 2 here and I will have that for you ready to go, and we'll have something attached to it as far as an assignment, as far as what I expect of you to do for this part of the course. I thank you for your time, and goodbye.